Hello and welcome to the ACE Anthropology. In the previous video, we talked about classical evolutionism and historical particularism. In this video, we will be discussing in brief about diffusionism and as far as diffusionism is concerned, this was a reaction, rather a strong reaction towards classical evolutionism. Classical evolution did not believed in diffusionism, and hence diffusion considered that along with the evolution, diffusion also plays a significant role. But this was rejected by classical evolutionists, and hence a strong reaction towards that came in the form of diffusionism. As far as diffusionism is concerned, it is divided into three schools: British school, German school, and American school. As far as the British school is concerned, there is a part which is Egyptology. It means that the culture and civilization originated at Egypt and then spread out through the world. That was the view of Perry and Smith. But there is also a school called as reverse school, which we will discuss later. As far as the Germans were concerned, there were three scholars: Fritz Grabner, Leo Frobenius, and William Schmidt. Similarly, the scholars which are associated with American school of diffusionism is Franz Boas, Whistler, and A.L. Kroeber. We have talked about Franz Boas in historical particularism in the previous video. Here our main focus will be on Clark Whistler and Kroeber. As you know that we are doing anthropological theories, and these are the topics that we have finished. Okay, so just let me write it down. Diffusionism. So diffusionism simply means a spread. In a very layman term, we'll call it as spreading from or transmission. For example, if there is a trait A, it goes to civilization B, we will call it as a diffusion. Then there are various ways such as active diffusion or passive diffusion, etc., that we will study up. That's not right now important. Here we have to understand that what basically diffusion means. So diffusion, it means that spreading of the various cultural traits and patterns from one civilization to other or one culture to other. That is what is called as diffusionism. Here we'll start with the British school. British school. See, as far as these videos are concerned, you will get a good answer writing content, right? For explanation and a complete video series, that will be only possible when I get 1000 subscribers, right? After 1000 subscriber, I can start a live class. So for that, it is important to reach to this goal of 1000 subscriber. So unless and until we get this, we do not get this, we cannot start a regular classes, and hence the particular topics we will be finishing here. So first in British school is Egyptology. And the very much scholars which are associated with it, it's Smith and Perry. As far as Smith was concerned, he was a doctor and a physician. He said that Egypt is the origin of culture. Egypt is the origin of culture, and cradle of culture. Cradle of culture. Egypt as an epicenter of diffusion of the culture, and epicenter of diffusionism. Diffusionism. That is what was said by Smith. The reason was when he went there, he saw a huge pyramid, the structures, the various developments in mathematics, astronomy, etc. And he thought that if something of this size is made, then there is definitely a kind of uh, what we say, not way ahead of their time. So they were definitely way ahead of time, and that is what Smith believed. So we will write down some of the basics of British schools, and this will be your answer fodder, right? So first, diffusion is one of the way of cultural change, including evolution. So diffusionists do not ignored or do not opposed the process of classical evolution or evolution in general. They said that even with evolution, diffusion is also one of the process of cultural change. So diffusionism is one of way to cultural change, to cultural say, along with evolution. Okay, so they do not said the way evolutionist said that there is only one process, which is evolutionism. So diffusionists did not say that. They said that diffusionism is one of the way of cultural change along with evolutionism. Then they talked about cultural borrowing. Cultural borrowing. It means that certain traits or certain objects of civilization can be borrowed from some other civilization, and that is what they call it as borrowing. For example, there are things which are prevalent in the Western world, and now the South Asians are trying to copy it, or they are just borrowing from that particular culture. The tradition of New Year, 31st, 1st January, this is nothing but cultural borrowing from the Western world. It was definitely a strong reaction. It was a strong reaction towards classical evolutionism. Definitely it was, because classical evolutionism or evolutionist, they disagree with the concept of diffusionism, or they did not pay any attention to the concept of diffusionism. The era of colonization, the spread of cultural atom in foreign ideas, and brought back to the new idea from them. So during, you say, there was a era of colonization. During the era of colonization, it was seen that from there was a colonizer, and there were people who were colonized. Consider here the example of Britain, here India. So there were certain traits which were transferred from Britain to India, but at the same time there were some spirituality which transferred from India to Britain. So this is nothing but cultural borrowing, as well as we call it as the spread of cultural atom. Spread of cultural items. Okay, so people are unequal innovativeness and invention in nature. See, the very important postulate of diffusionism is that people are not equally innovative right? And hence there are people under different circumstances react differently, and people are not definitely stationary, they are dynamic. People are dynamic, and cultural traits are amenable to diffusion, which may be symmetrical or asymmetrical. So here simply it means that cultural traits will get diffused. This cultural traits will get diffused. Now, the next point in British school is that this diffusionism is of two types, that is active and passive. The active diffusionism is imposed. For example, colonization. You might have heard the word the white man's burden. So that comes under active. Second is passive. Passive is something which is accepted without any resistance or with little resistance. And active is something which is basically imposed. For example, the training camp or re-education camp of Muslims in Uyghur province. On Uyghurs or East Turkmenistan, this particular place in China, it comes with kind of active diffusionism where the state is imposing their ideology on the Uyghur Muslims. Second, if a trait or if a cultural trait is diffused from one society to another, then what will happen with it? So first, it may be accepted as it is, or second, it may be rejected or modified, diluted, rejected. Third, rejected. For example, aloo tikki is only available in Indian KFC, Indian McDonald's. It's not available elsewhere. So that is what the global turn to local, that is glocalization or globalization or localization. Glocalization. Okay. The diffusionism should not be seen as mechanic process, and only those traits which are socially and economically essential, beneficial are accepted. And if they're not, if they're accepted only when they are socially and economically essential, and hence and only then they are accepted. Some cultural traits are accepted after modification. So yes, there are some cultural traits they are accepted, but after modification. The second in British school only. Reverse school. Reverse was a physician, a field worker, and started as an evolutionist. But he left evolutionism and joined diffusionism. He did field work in Toda tribe, Nilgiri, and Melanesian tribe, Melanesian tribe, Southwest Oceania. Rivers is also called as father of medical anthropology. Father of medical anthropology. He was basically an evolutionist turned diffusionist. But he was different from Smith and Perry, because Smith and Perry believed, Smith particularly believed that, Smith and Perry both, they believed that the culture or civilization they spread from Egypt and no other center can be present. But Rivers, though he started his career as evolutionist and then turned into diffusionist, he believed that the evolution of culture is multicentric. For example, unlike Smith and Perry, he said that there are different centers of civilization. For example, this is Egypt, then this is Mesopotamia, this is Indus Valley civilization, this is some Chinese civilization. So at the same time, they originated, they grew, and they disappeared. So this is what basically was said by Rivers. He became diffusionist, but his approach was definitely different, right? He became a diffusionist, but his approach was different. There were multiple centers of origin. He showed with proof that diffusion, but could not prove. He tried to show the proof that diffusion occurs, but he could not give proof to it. He gave the concept of dilution and deterioration. He gave the concept of dilution and deterioration. He gave these two concepts of dilution and deterioration. He could not bring any proof. There was conjecturalism, because there was no data, and hence led to conjecturalism. हवा में बातें. He supported psychic unity. Psychic unity was basically supported by classical evolutionists, and British school Rivers particularly was an evolutionist in the beginning who turned into diffusionism. So he supported psychic unity. He was of one of the opinion that yes, evolution was definitely a process of cultural change, but along with evolution, diffusion is also a process of a social change, and hence he quit evolutionism and joined diffusionism, because diffusionism gave him a wider scope, which was not given by evolutionism. Here we'll talk little about Smith and Perry. Particularly Smith was a surgeon and went to study mummies in Egypt. And he was just astonished after watching the civilization, the huge pyramid, the structures, half human, half animal, this type of thing. And he thought that nothing in the world can match this level of sophistication, as well as in ancient time, definitely this type of structures with huge geometry, everything was involved, right? So he thought that it was nothing but a cradle of civilization, a cradle of culture. cradle of civilization and culture. He said that civilization radiated out of Egypt. He said that civilization radiated out of Egypt. People moved out of Egypt to just provide civilization throughout the world. And he said that no two people in the world are of the same innovative and inventive. So he said that in the world people are not similar inventive, or they are not similar innovative. And he ruled out the theory of, he said that no psychic unity. He said he ruled out the theory of psychic unity, and said that there's no psychic unity. Agriculture, irrigation, worship, pyramid, life after death was found nowhere in the world. So this agriculture, math, pyramid, life after death, worships, sun worship basically. And Perry wrote a book called as Children of Sun, in which he talked about how the civilization originated and then spread from Egypt. Civilization spread from Egypt. So this is what was said by Perry. Culture from Egypt was diffused throughout the world, and anthropologists must find out the path. So that is what was said by Smith. Smith said that the culture and civilization, they have spread out from Egypt, and now the work of anthropologists is to find how they moved from that Egypt to the world, and they basically were searching the ways. And one must study culture in space and time. So basically culture is something which is dynamic, which is not static, and hence if we are studying culture, there is definitely need to study culture in definite time and space. So this form of diffusionism, which is called as extreme diffusionism. So this is what in particularly Smith's British school was called as. They were extremely extreme form. Okay. So he was unaware of the other civilization. First, Smith, if we talk about the criticism of it, he was unaware of other civilization. For example, Mayan civilization, Mesopotamian, Indus Valley civilization. So he was basically unaware of all of them. No evidence was shown by him. So definitely the conjecturalism. No evidence, no data was provided by Smith. Entire theory was based on imagination. So basically he was E.B. Tyler, who gave the concept of religion, the right origin of religion, where he talk about a philosophical savage philosophical man. So here Smith also just tell us a story of his imagination. That is what was a criticism of him. This was the criticism. See, he accepted the dilution of culture, and the concept of diffusion was accepted. He basically said that yes, a complete culture cannot be imposed on any other culture as it is. So there is definitely a kind of localization. Okay, so this global part of culture will, when percolate into local part, so that will definitely be a local part, and that will be a globalization. Okay, so that was basically accepted by Smith, Perry, as well as the reverse. So basically this is all about the British school. Now we will talk about the important, and that is German school. As far as the German school and American school is concerned, we have to understand that American school was basically a supporter of German school, or they derived their uh, methodology from German school. And Franz Boas of historical particularism, he was basically a connecting link between German school and American school. That the way we have discussed, Fritz, Leo, and William. These were the three scholars which were associated with German school. The German school of thought is diffusionism is also called as culture circle theory, or it is also called as culture craze. So if anything like culture circle theory or culture craze, so you understand that they are basically asking you about German school of diffusionism. German school of diffusionism. Fritz, Leo, and William. These are the three people that you have to understand or associate. See, this theory of culture circle theory was given by William Smith. So William Smith was basically the proponent of this theory. He says that the concept of Egyptology is vague. So he rejected Egyptology. He said that the concept of Egyptology was vague. Second, he did not try to find out the path of diffusionism. So as Smith says that the origin or the cradle of civilization was Egypt, and the cultural traits or civilization have diffused from Egypt to the other part of world, and the role of anthropologist is to decode the path of evolution. So here in German school, William Smith says that he did not try to find out the path. No need, or did not tried to find the path of diffusionism. He tried to prove that diffusion occurred and not the proof of diffusionism. The goal of William or the culture circle theory was to prove that diffusion occurred, and they did not concern themselves with nothing to do with path. Basically, the main motto of German school or William Smith was to prove that the process of diffusion is happening, and they were not bothering, or they were not worried about the path of it. There is a culture center, and from where the culture travels like a ripple of water. See, for example, this is a beaker where water is kept. If we put a stone here, there is a ripples of water. And when this water ripples will touch here, they'll also start a reverse ripples. And again the moving ripples will make them, and then there will be a resultant calm down of water. So basically this is what was said by William Smith. The way this is a cultural center, if a trait is here, the trait will move towards the little tradition. Okay, this is the greater one, this is the little one. So from a center that will move to core, and something from core will also move towards center. But there are different centers, so this center will have contact with the center of this greater tradition. Similarly, there will here and here will be the similar one, so the edges will also interact with each other, and once this civilization becomes close, this civilization will start degrading or destroying itself. The example is Brahmanism in Indian subcontinent. The way Brahmanism declined, the reason was its closed nature. So when it will decline, certain portion of it will be subsumed by this, certain by this civilization, and certain the next which is associated with it. He says that one must analyze diffusionism in time and space. Second, that they gave importance to material form of culture than non-material. Importance to material than non-material. They gave importance to material forms than non-material form. They were concerned with both material. They, in the sense, the earlier one, okay, that is Smith and Perry or British school, they gave importance to material form, okay, and not the non-material. But when it comes to German school, they give equal importance to material and non-material. Method of study, they include two criteria. The first was criteria of form, and second was criteria of quantity. Culture, along with evolution and diffusionism, changes, right? Culture changes basically when it travels from one place to another, or from within when it grows, or it brings some social changes, and that social changes again move to some other culture, and now this thing is completely different and this thing is completely different, though their evolution may be same. Diffusion is the same, but now the thing which have the cultural traits which have diffused are different. This school, that is German schools, are basically criticized because they had become pseudo-historical or conjecturalism. So they were also criticized because of pseudo-historical thoughts that they brought in, and conjecturalism. You will write down the heading like criticism. Okay, so you will write down this heading. Okay, this was the first, that they brought conjecturalism in picture. Second, they did not explain the diffusion of non-material culture. They only said that they gave importance to material and non-material culture, but they did not explain the diffusion of non-material culture, how they are diffused from one society to another society. It was improved version of English school of diffusionism. Definitely, first, did not explain the diffusionism of non-material object. They supported the multicentric origin of study. So the way reverse basically talked about the multi-center origin. So they supported they supported, these two were criticism. They supported multicentric evolution of culture, and they supported the diffusion of culture, and they supported diffusion of culture. Now, if we discuss in brief about English school or British school and German school, we find that the British school, in comparison to German school, was extreme in nature, because they said that civilization started in Egypt and evolved, and they did not said anything about multicentric, right? So they were basically liberal in nature. They talked about multicentric evolution of culture. Then the British school of thought believed in origin of from single origin, whereas the German school, they believed in multicentric origin. According to British, the evolution of culture and diffusion was from Egypt. As far as Germans were concerned, they say there are multiple sources of evolution and diffusion. They did not use any criteria. They did not use any criteria, but Germans use the criteria of forms and quantity. British school focused on tracing the path, whereas German school did not trace the path. The focus on checking the occurrence of diffusion, that diffusion has happened. So that was basically the focus of German school of thought. The British school of thought mainly focuses on material part, whereas the German school of thought focuses on material and non-material part. They gave less importance to evolution. They integrated evolution and diffusionism. Both of them supported the dilution of cultural trait. They supported the dilution of traits. Both of them supported the dilution of the cultural traits. Now we will discuss about the American school. As far as American school of thought is concerned, they were influenced by German. School. The scholars which are associated with American school of thoughts are Franz Boas, Whistler, Clark Whistler, and A.L. Kroeber. Clark Whistler come up with his various concepts such as cultural area and cultural age. Okay, now we'll start with one. These are the three scholars which are associated with the American school of thought. See, this is nothing but they were similar. They were influenced by German school. Franz Boas was German in origin and lived in USA. So he was basically the link between American school and German school. They used the museum museum methodology. For example, uh, the occurrence of artifacts, tools, or whatever they found, they kept the instruments of similar time and place together, and they found that there was a kind of a similarity from the instruments they found in the similar region. So okay, so American school of thought, in that A.L. Kroeber gave a birth and death of civilization. Birth and death of civilization. Birth and death of civilization. He says that when civilization reaches its climax, then it become hostile. It become hostile to the entry of other cultural trait. Hostile to entry of other cultural traits, and the civilization starts declining. So the declination stops. The flourishing or the new entry of the civilization cultural trait stops. At that point, the novelty or the new thing in this relation of civilization and the people, it somehow declines, and that is how from the climax the civilization starts declining. See, this cultural trait diffuses from one culture to another culture through the process of diffusionism. And when a culture becomes hostile or it closes its boundary for other culture, then the diffusion stops. And this leads to the collapse of various civilization. For example, Indus Valley civilization, we do not know the exact reason, or definitely the multicentric reason, but this was one of the reason of the decline of Indus Valley civilization. Or Brahmanism, how Brahmanism started declining in India, that is one of the example. Robert Marriott and L.P. Vidyarthi, they used this concept of greater and little tradition. We'll study in detail about them when we'll start paper 2, but right now this is the only thing which is important here, that Kroeber was associated with birth and death of civilization. Now we'll start with the American School of Diffusionism, where we'll focus mainly on Franz Boas and Clark Whistler. Clark Whistler is important because a certain question can directly appear in exam, because he definitely have certain values, right? And the concepts that he has given in this syllabus. So American School of Diffusionism was influenced by German School of Diffusionism, and the link between the two was Franz Boas. Franz Boas was basically a geographer and a German by birth, and was appointed in American Museum as curator. So basically we have talked about it, and basically about Franz Boas. He, along with his student Clark Whistler was a student of Franz Boas, was supported to the idea on the display of exhibits of American Indians in museum. So both Boas and Whistler were against the three-stage classification of Morgan or Montesquieu, which was savagery, barbarism, and civilization. So they were against this 3 stage of classification of Morgan. They were influenced by museum methodology of German, that the way we have talked. They were influenced by museum methodology. They were influenced by museum methodology, and accordingly they classified cultural items from the same geographical region together. So the elements or the items of cultural elements that they found, they clubbed them together according to geographical proximity. It was found that the more similar cultures it was found that the cultural item of some of the American tribes living close to one another are more similar than the one who lived apart. So closer were similar, and farther were less similar. So from this, Whistler evolved a concept of culture area, and he took food as one of the representative of the cultural area that we will discuss further in this lecture. As far as this particular part was concerned, it was found that from this exhibition the concept of cultural area came into picture, and the term culture area was first time used. The term culture area was first time used by O.T. Mason. O.T. Mason first time used the term cultural area, but later it was also used by Kroeber, but he did not give a significant development to this concept, and the further development of cultural area was brought out by Clark Whistler. So Clark Whistler led to the development of this word. He said that similarities in the cultural areas is basically due to diffusionism. So he says that the similarities which are there in cultural area is basically due to diffusionism. Next he talks about the features. Features of cultural area. He says that cultural area can be defined as a geographical zone, having a number of group living together, and shows cultural similarity, and they are when they are grouped together. Each culture has a center which Whistler calls cultural center, where greatest concentration of cultural area occurs. For example, consider this to be a geographical zone where there are different number of individual culture, and the shaded part here is culture center. You see that these culture centers will interact with each other. First they will be borrowing, then there is definitely mutual borrowing between center and the cultural unit. Then there will be a mutual, or between the culture there will be some give and take which will happen, and hence it will come to an equilibrium. Similarly, this particular portion there will be another civilization 2. Consider civilization 1, this is civilization 2. There will be various similar thing will happen, right? And there will also be interaction between this two, this two, this two, similar here, right? So this is basically something which comes under a broad picture, and the broad picture again comes into some of the infinite broad particular portion. So that is what was said by Clark Whistler, that this is basically a cultural area that he was talking about. Each culture has a center, which Clark Whistler called it as cultural center. Then he said that the role of cultural center was to control the entire area politically and socially. So the role of cultural center was to control the entire area politically as well as socially, that is economy, politics, religion, and governed by culture center. So basically economy, polity, religion, etc., they were governed by control of center. This culture center is also the place from where all the cultural traits typically appear. So this cultural center is a place where we find all traits which are definitely percolated or diffused into the sub-civilization or subcultures, and we can find all the traits here in cultural center. This cultural spread centrifugally and centripetally, right? From center to civilized world or subculture, it spreads from center to subcenter and subcenter to center. You see that these cultural traits are in their pristine form in cultural center. So in pristine form. So whatever the words I am writing here, they are the highlighters, they are the key points. You should write down and remember what is being told around them, and you should also make a sentence out of it. It is not that cultural trait diffuses within the same area, rather they spread from one culture to another culture. The way we have made a diagram, that if this is something, a center, it will have an interaction with each other, these one will have interaction with each other, and then there will be another center where another culture will have interaction with each other, it will have interaction with each other, and there will be then there will be a third culture which will have interaction on the boundary, and this thing will continue, right? This thing continue, this particular will have interaction with this one. So this is what is called as cultural spread. So this is a cultural area. Okay, individual one is cultural area, and you see there is a movement of cultural trait that is will represent with a diagram. Now cultural center is one where there is a greater concentration of traits. Concentration of traits. It controls the political and economic activity of the area. Now what Clark Whistler did, he constructed a culture area considering it to be food as a criteria. He made culture area by making sure that food is one of the criteria. There are 300 American Indian tribe in America, so he divided them into basically 6 food area and cultural area. For example, bison for plains, caribou for Eskimos. Write it down. Fish, particularly salmon fish for the one living in the coastal region. Wild seed for the California. maize for eastern part of America, and last, that is intensive agriculture on western America. So that is how the Clark Whistler gave it. With the help of technology, people of cultural area exploit the environment. As far as the survival of human being is concerned, food is one of the basic requirement. And in order to get the food from environment, human develop a different type of technology which gives him edge over the environmental hurdles in achieving his food. We can chart out different cultural area depending upon the close economic and ecological similarities. Whistler related these cultural areas with archaeology, language, ethnology, etc. And he showed that these culture groups are interconnected and interdependent over each other. He said that these cultural parts were basically interdependent and interconnected with each other. He gave another concept of age. According to him, if a trait, consider this is civilization 1, civilization 2, civilization 3, civilization 4, and civilization 5. Here we give A. When it is diffused to this civilization, it becomes A dash. When from here it reaches here and it becomes A double dash. From here it becomes A triple dash, and here it becomes A 4 dash. Similarly, here is B, here it becomes B dash, here it becomes B double dash. Then here is C, here it becomes C dash, C double dash, C triple dash. So the concept of age, it means that the cultural trait, which is A, B and C, these are the three cultural traits which are diffused from C1 to C2 to C3 to C4 to C5. He says that these cultural traits will be diffused from civilization A to B to C to D in such a way that the trait which is found the farthest is the one that have taken more time. So he says that Whistler, he found that the cultural traits were found in the wider area. So he said that there was definitely a different time which was required from cultural traits to diffuse from civilization 1 to civilization N. And he says that there were two types of diffusion. First was natural and second was organized. Natural was a long process. And there was no cultural imposition. So it was basically passive. No cultural imposition. And it took long process, and hence it reached longer, and they are older. If they are reaching farther, they are older. Second were organized. They were active. They took relatively lesser time. They were quickly transmitted, and they were basically together, natural and organized. They were basically in time and space. According to in time and space, we have to study them and not in isolation. American school of diffusionism They accepted the idea of psychic unity, accepted psychic unity as an ideology, and it was not but it was not an explanatory principle, but just a tool. This was used as a tool to combat racial discrimination. So this was basically used for combating the racial tool. Okay, so we can talk about this. Is a little topic have been remaining. For example, the difference between American school and German school, Clark Whistler's law of diffusionism, and Krober's contribution to anthropology. So we will do these three topics in the next video. Stay tuned. Thank you for watching.